Sheriff. Thank you for coming to our press conference and getting this out to the citizens of our community and beyond today. We wanted to give everybody an update on this case that we've been working for a few days on the abduction of the two little girls by the biological father, and kind of bring some conclusion to it at this phase of the game. Before I get into the details of that, though, what I'd really like to cover is kind of some of the agencies involved, et cetera, because I don't want to get into the details and lose sight of some thank yous. And so I'm going to start with my thank yous first. And here with me is our District Attorney, Sarah Hacker, and Jason Randolph, the Fresno Supervisory Special Agent of the FBI. These cases take a big team effort. Coordination, relationships that are built over years. Without past relationships and working together on other tough cases like this one, it makes it difficult to accomplish what this team did in such a short amount of time. One of the people that couldn't be here today that I want to specifically thank is Deputy Assistant Director Sergio Albaran from U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. I reached out to him a couple days ago. He's part of the Targeting Operations Division Enforcement Removal Operations, and they were a big help as well. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here. Some of the agencies involved. I'm going to start with mine because that's the easiest one for me. The Kings County Sheriff's Office. I can't thank my staff enough for what they've done over these last few days, especially my detectives. They pour their heart and soul into these, and it just really shows when we have outcomes like this. Kings County Major Crime Task Force, the Kings County District Attorney's Office, FBI field offices, Fresno and San Diego. Big thank you to the FBI. I mean, they were such staunch partners in this, tremendous partners. U.S. Marshals field offices, Fresno and San Diego as well. CHP, the Mexico Liaison Unit Investigator, Tony Contreras. HSI, CBP, DH, Department of Homeland Security. And a big shout out to Mexico's law enforcement that helped us on this case this week. The General Prosecutors of Baja, Mexico, and the Baja State Police. We can't thank them enough for their help on this. And lastly, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office Air Unit, with a special thanks and shout out to Sheriff Dicus there. To get into the details of the case a little bit, our victim in this case is Madeline Rose Cuevas, 22 years old. The two children that were involved this week were Arya and Alana, 3 years old and 2 years old. The suspect, Jonathan Maldonado-Cruz. Today, I'm deeply sorry for the loss of Madeline, and I just want to say to the family, my condolences and prayers go out to you. It's such a tragedy that should never occur. Two babies lost their mother, and we're learning through this investigation that she was just abused, that they had not been in contact with Madeline, and so about 4 p.m. On Tuesday, January 28th, we went to the residence that they had already made entry into and discovered that she was deceased inside the residence. The deputies arrived on scene and discovered her, and she had a gunshot wound to her body. And some of the things I'm not going to get into specifics today, so I'll leave it at gunshot wound. The detectives were called out and took over the investigation. In a short amount of time, detectives determined the homicide most likely took place on Monday night or early Tuesday morning, a little after midnight, about 1 a.m., which meant that when you look at the time frame, the suspect had about a 15-hour head start on us. I want to repeat that because that's really important when you tie this back to some of the social media stuff going on. The suspect had about a 15-hour head start on us. Detectives learned real quickly that two children were possibly with the suspect, and some of the initial information indicated that he may have fled to Mexico. Our agency immediately enlisted the help of the FBI, coordinating with local and federal authorities in both the United States and Mexico, with the sole purpose at this point of getting the children returned back safely. You know, in cases like this, you focus a lot on the suspect, but when there's children involved, the utmost important was getting those children back safely. The FBI began tracking both cell phones, and when I say both cell phones, I'll clarify, the suspect's cell phone and the victim's cell phone was also missing. And through that tracking, they determined that the suspect had gone south to Mexico and across the Mexican-American border. As detectives, the FBI and Mexican authorities began to close in on the suspect's whereabouts. Detectives were able to successfully negotiate the surrender of the suspect this morning. and the safe return of the children to authorities at the border crossing of San Ysidro. The suspect's mother was a critical part of these negotiations, and we thank her for this. I know that was probably not an easy. This case was a 24-hour operation. Staff across the board that I mentioned worked tirelessly since this came to us on Tuesday afternoon. We thank the public for their understanding in this matter. We've had a lot of inquiries from the media, the public, and whether it be through social media posts, you know, the public wants to know immediately what's going on. We live in that era now with social media where everybody wants that instant knowledge, instant gratification, but we hold back a lot of information, and I hope the public understands that. You know, we always appreciate when the public helps us, but they got to understand we can't give out everything right off the bat. We've got to hold things back so we can do our job. There was an amazing amount of work being done behind the scenes, and I just would like to extend my appreciation to the Mexican authorities again, and especially we understand that one of the Mexican authorities unit member was injured in this effort. I don't know his condition, but we hope he's doing okay in recovery. This case is continuing and remains active. Our focus has been on getting these children home, and we still have a lot of follow-up to do and a lot of investigation to complete, but we had a big hurdle this morning by getting those kids home, and they're on their way back to Kings County as I speak. And we look forward to reuniting them with their family here. KCO detectives worked hard on this, but you always have other partners, and there's an unsung partner in this week that hardly ever gets a mention, and I just want to mention Kings County Child Protective Services. Early on in this, we reached out to them, but the unfortunate tragedy of this, you're going to have kids who no longer have a mother, and their father's going to be in custody. So you have two children that are going to be deeply impacted by this, and a special thanks to Kings County Child Protective Services for being there at a moment's notice to go with us down south to make sure we get these kids home and that they're well cared for on the return back to Kings County. I'm not going to get into the evidence. I know you're going to have some questions. Focus has to be on now going back and going through these interviews without tainting people by what they see or hear from me standing before you today. We're going to focus on a lot of different things, the interviews, the suspect's motive. You know, those are things we have some information on, but we just don't know details yet. We would ask the public that might have some of that information to please reach out to us, because now that the suspect's going to be in custody and the children are going to be reunited with family, we really want to do a top quality case for this so we can prepare it for the district attorney's office and get it to her office for review, and hopefully in the long run prosecution for this horrific crime. So at this point, I'm going to stop there and turn it over to our district attorney, Sarah Hacker, and then we'll take some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming here today. First and foremost, I want to reach out to the family of Madeline. What a terrible loss. And to have to go through the trauma of not only losing a loved one, but also experiencing the fear of losing possibly two children must have been extremely traumatic for them, and my heart goes out to them. I'm so happy that the law enforcement has been able to recover the children safely, and that they've been returned back to their family. With respect to this case, our office has received a copy of the file. The investigation is not complete, and so our review of the case is still under review. I expect that we will be making a filing decision in the next few days, but we still need to see further reports, and we don't have all of the information to make an adequate filing decision at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the cell phone. Was the cell phone, was that being tracked to Mexico or a different location as well? Where exactly was the suspect and these children found?
So we do have tracking information on the cell phone. I'm not going to get into details where we tracked it to and where it went and everywhere, but yes, part of the cell phone data that led us to the location where we believe the suspect was hiding was in Mexico.
So he brought her cell phone with him?
He brought his cell phone and her cell phone,
and then
correct.
The other question a lot of people are wondering about is the Amber Alert. People say they didn't get it until 11:30 the next morning. People really just care about these kids. They want to know,
yeah,
you know, that delay. Could they have been found before they were in a different country? Could they have been
Right.
found here in Kings County?
It's a great question, and just to kind of put that to rest, when Amber Alerts go out, you have options, statewide options, regional options, et cetera. When the paper Amber Alert was sent out to the media and locally on our social media, we believed at that time that it was going to go out statewide. A few hours went by and it hadn't got out yet. So then we started to inquire, like, hey, how come this was the pings on the cell phone were showing that it was already in Mexico. So you have to make quick decisions in these types of cases, and a decision was made, a tactical decision was made not to let it go out statewide yet, because what that does when you put that out statewide, it inundates our investigators with all these tips that are coming in now, because that's the nature of our community and communities across the state. And so we held off and waited because we wanted to see if we could track the cell phone further. But once you get into another country, cell phone tracking becomes a bit of a challenge. And then as time elapsed, you start to worry that it's going to come back into the United States, and yet we haven't hit the button yet for the emergency alert to go out statewide or even into a specific region. So it was delayed because we were working on those things. And we have inside information that the public doesn't, the media doesn't. And so we're doing the best we can to try to out when we can. So it was delayed going out to people's cell phones, because then we started to worry because the tracking became a little bit further and further between. You know, cell phones die if you don't have a cord, or they turn it off, or they discard it. And then we were like, hey, if this person comes back into the country and we lose that cell phone tracking, we need to get it out to the public. So that's why it was delayed in going out to the public, because we were gathering a lot of information at that time with our law enforcement partners. And so hopefully the public kind of understands that a little bit, that, you know, we would love for all of them to come work for us, but we got to do our thing. And the media as well. You know, we appreciate the push out of information that we initially push out, but sometimes these things are evolving, and, you know, you always have some concerns of what the suspect knows, and you're playing kind of a cat and mouse game with the suspect on, hey, what do they know and what don't they know? Do they know where we're at? And so anyway, that's the reason for that. So thank you.
So did the initial mistake, that was with like technology or within?
So I'll say this. We thought that perhaps there was a mistake early on, but we learned through this process that there's two levels of an Amber Alert. One is that fact sheet that they send back to local agencies immediately that you can share locally. And one is you have to specifically tell them, hey, hit the statewide emergency alert button. I'm not going to call it a mistake, because in this case we got two little girls back that are safe and happy and seem to be doing well. But it's a tactical move. And, you know, in hindsight, could we have put it out? We could have. Would it have worked? It might have. You know, the Monday morning quarterback in me sometimes thinks that.
The suspect was, he crossed the country on his car. It was on Tijuana? Or was
It's a great question, and if you know that, we would love to know it. So we don't know that yet, and we're not going to get into those details as we do develop them, because we do want to interview people that might have the knowledge of that.
If you could just describe the state that the two little girls were found in. Were they scared? Were they hungry?
Yeah, and so, you know, they're 3 years old and 2 years old. And, you know, being a parent and a grandparent, children at that age sometimes are pretty oblivious to what's going on around them. And that's how I'll describe it. They seem like they're doing well. They're clothed. They're fed. You know, they seem jovial to an extent, and so they seem like they're doing great, you know, and it's a horrible tragedy, and at some point in their lives, you know, you hope they just never remember a day like this. But all in all, they look like a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old that were getting ready to get on an airplane.
I know that this kind of two parts. We have the homicide investigation
Sure.
and this kidnapping. Back to the criminal history. Now, this has kind of been discussed, but if you could tell us now if you've discovered anything in the meantime.
Yeah, and, you know, I'll kind of repeat what I said earlier. We really want to be careful what we talk about the investigation at this point, because we want those interviews to be kind of clean and clear with people that are watching this today. We know a lot of people are going to watch, and so I'm going to leave that for now, you know, with all due respect, because I really don't want to start getting into any of those details where now somebody has a different mindset than what they had before we put this stuff out. So.
And can you tell us anything more about where in Was it close?
Tijuana.
Tijuana, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did the suspect turn himself in? You mentioned the word located. Did he turn himself in?
Yeah, and so what happened was the FBI, through their sources and all their partners, had started to narrow in. And when you're doing these tracking devices, it starts as kind of a broad range, and then they start to pinpoint it. And they had pinpointed a certain area, and this morning, as they were getting ready to gear back up and go to that area, the suspect's mother reached out to our detective that's working on this case and said he's ready to turn himself in. And so they made arrangements through the mother for the children to come across first with grandma, and then the suspect after that. And you know, they stuck to their word this morning, and I'll give them credit for that. You know, that's the best outcome we could have asked for. You know, I really felt good going into today because we were so close last night, and I feel like we would have got them, but you just never know when you're going into a neighborhood and you know, and perhaps a hostile neighborhood. You just don't know, and so I'm thankful that it worked out the way it did this morning.
So the suspect is on his way to here? Or
Yes.
he's still in Mexico?
Yeah, the suspect and the children are on their way here as we speak. Yeah.
What are the next steps in this? I know charges are still being filed. Is that kind of something you could speak with about, you know, what kind of information you are using and kind of when we can get a time?
Well, I would say that we have some of the reports, but we have not seen the whole picture. And obviously, as the sheriff just said, he's still conducting his investigation, so we're not going to get the full story until the investigation is complete or close to complete. But we will be making a filing decision either tomorrow or Monday.
Do you have any idea perhaps, like, will there be, you know, enhancements to homicide, any kind of other child endangerment? Is that kind of the stuff that we might be looking at here?
I should not disclose exactly what we're looking at right now because we only have a limited amount of information, and once we get more information, that can change. What I can say is that we're taking this case very seriously. We have a deputy DA already assigned to the case who's working with the detectives, and once we get that information, we'll be making a filing decision.
You had mentioned the Kings County Child Protective Services. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way the process works for Child Protective Services, they have to go through a vetting process. And so, you know, I've been around a long time, and it used to be literally a deputy on the street would just pick a family member, go, here you go, can you take care of these kids now? It just doesn't happen in our world anymore. And so what Child Protective Services did and doubled over to are fit and don't have criminal histories, aren't a 290 registrant, and there's a process that they go through to make sure it's going to be a good fit and reintroduce. And so sometimes that happens super quick, and that could be something that happens tonight where they're like, okay, we vetted these people, because like I said, they've already been involved in our process this week, so they may already be way ahead of us on this. Sometimes kids do have to go into a temporary foster care for a day or two until they get the process vetted. And so, you know, it really just depends on how quick they're able to move forward. But that'll be the process next is they'll make sure that they put these children with who they believe at this time is the best to care for them in the current situation.
You mentioned a 15-hour heads up that, you know, that has to be hard coming in after that amount of time. You know,
Yeah.
could things have been a lot different if maybe members of the community might have said, hey, I heard something and called you? You know, is there any, you know, is there
Yeah.
a message to the community there of like, I wish you had called sooner? I mean, I know we have half happy ending with these
Right.
children, but I mean, that they went through some really, I'm sure, hard situations.
Yeah.
thinking about
You
it.
know, and just by virtue of distance, you know, most of us have traveled down to San Diego or even into Mexico, and we know that depending on traffic, it's, 6 to 12 hours to get there. So either worst of traffic, he still gets there before we even have the first call on this. So it puts us at a little, out there that had some signs or something within that time frame or the day before, they may feel guilty about it now. You know, I can't speak for them personally, but we would still want them to come forward and tell us about it because, it's important for that investigation now to get to the bottom of this and try to figure out, okay, the who, what, where, when, how, and why. What can we do next? And then, what can people learn from this and families learn from this? It sure seems like there's some domestic violence type situations going on with this case specifically. And, You know, it's something that you just hate to see. And so I just encourage people, you know, who have loved ones where you see people having a difficulty in a relationship, and I'm not sure that that's the case here, but if you do see that, you know, please intervene, you know, some form or fashion. You know, there's so many programs out there now, and 211 and all these different things that you can call to get some mental health help. You know, as we see those things, we sure hope people, you know, will come forward and try to intervene with their family members to make sure that they're safe, because it's just really important. And so, you know, it's difficult. But, yeah, we want people to report things that they think are suspicious, whether it be to us, Child Protective Services, Adult Protective Services, or even to local mental health services, just to have that intervention.
And you mentioned it was Madeline's father who had
Yeah.
talked to her. How crucial was it that he did that?
Well, you know, it was very crucial, because had it gone on for another day or 2 days, who knows? You know, you just don't know where this had gone. You know, and I'll offer some just heartfelt, you know, condolences to him specifically, because he's, you know, he's obviously taken this really hard. And when staff talked to him earlier, you know, he was very emotional about it and super thankful. And I just, you know, I can't even imagine what the family's going through and what he's going through. You know, as the dad of a daughter, I'm just blown away by it. And, you know, there's things in your career that last with you for a lifetime, and this will be one of those cases that lasts with me for a lifetime. And I just can't thank my staff enough for everything they did this week and you know, bringing it to this point. And now, you know, now the rest of the work starts, and if we get enough information, which I believe we will, to book this guy tonight and charge him, I hope he rots in hell. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate it.